Okay, all right, guys, back. So it's time for our study group time. And let me type it in so that way I don't forget. Comment. Okay. All right, cool. Hey guys. All right. Hey Cassidy. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's funny because I got a haircut. Well, I gave myself a haircut. Oh, hey cuz. And awesome. All right, so here we go. Okay, so we are doing study group time. So what study group is this is what we're doing. We're reading this book, right? So we're going to read this book, and then we're going to talk about what's in the book. That's what we're going to do. So the way it works is I basically read some of the book. I stop, give commentary, give my own opinion, give you an idea of what I think about it, my own experience, etc. It's pretty much how it works. And so that's the focus of. Thank you, Lego. So that's the focus of the study group time. Okay. So if you guys have any questions about the material, if you want to ask me about the book itself, the topics that we are going to discuss, if you want to ask me spiritual topics or just, topics in general, no personal readings, no personal questions, because that was in the last hour. This is different. So if you want to ask me, now is the time. Go ahead and put those in the comment section below, and I will check some of these before I get off here this evening. But yeah, so that's pretty much what we do for study group time. I was reading something. Okay. All right, guys. So let's get started. So I'm on page 104 of the book, and it's called Recognizing Your Child. Okay. So you are a human being. What does that mean? Mastery of life is not a question of control, but of finding a balance between human and being. Mother, father, husband, wife, young, old, the roles you play, the functions you fulfill, whatever you do, all that belongs to the human dimension. It has its place and needs to be honored, but in itself, it is not enough for a fulfilled, truly meaningful relationship or life. Human alone is never enough, no matter how hard you try or what you achieve. Then there is being. It is found in the still, alert presence of consciousness itself, the consciousness that you are. Human is form. Being is formless. Human and being are not separate but interwoven. In the human dimension, you are unquestionably superior to your child. You are bigger, stronger, know more, can do more. If that dimension is all you know, you will feel superior to your child, if only unconsciously. And you will make your child feel inferior, if only unconsciously. There is no equality between you and your child, because there is only form in your relationship, and in form you are of course not equal. You may love your child, but your love will be human only, that is to say conditional, possessive, intermittent. Only beyond form and being are you equal, and only when you find the formless dimension in yourself can there be true love in that relationship. The presence that you are, the timeless I am, recognizes itself in another and the other, and the child in this case feels loved, that is to say recognized. To love is to recognize yourself in another. The otherness then stands revealed as an illusion pertaining to the purely human realm, the realm of form. The longing for love that is in every child is a longing to be recognized, not on the level of form, but on the level of being. If parents honor only the human dimension of the child but neglect being, the child will sense that the relationship is unfulfilled, that something absolutely vital is missing, and there will be a buildup of pain in the child and sometimes unconscious resentment towards the parents. Why don't you recognize me? Why don't you recognize me? This is what the pain of or resentment seems to be saying. When another recognizes you, that recognition draws the dimension of being more fully into this world through both of you. That is the love that redeems the world. I have been speaking of this with specific reference to the relationship with your child, but it equally applies, of course, to all relationships. It has been said God is love, but that is not absolutely correct. God is the one life in and beyond the countless forms of life. Love implies duality, lover and beloved, subject and object. So love is the recognition of oneness in the world of duality. This is the birth of God into the world of form. Love makes the world less worldly, less dense, more transparent to the divine dimension, the light of consciousness itself. Giving up role-playing. To do whatever is required of you in any situation without it becoming a role that you identify with is an essential lesson in the art of living that each one of us is here to learn. You become most powerful in whatever you do if the action is performed for its own sake, rather than as a means to protect, enhance, or conform to your role identity. Every role is a fictitious sense of self, and through it everything becomes personalized and thus corrupted and distorted by the mind-made little me and whatever role it happens to be playing. Most of the people who are in positions of power in this world, such as politicians, TV personalities, business, as well as religious leaders, are completely identified with their role. With a few notable exceptions. They may be considered VIPs, but they are no more than unconscious players in the egoic game, a game that looks so important, yet is ultimately devoid of true purpose. It is, in the words of Shakespeare, a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Amazingly, Shakespeare arrived at this conclusion without having the benefit of television. If the egoic Earth drama has any purpose at all, it is an indirect one. It creates more and more suffering on the planet, and suffering, although largely ego-created, is in the end also ego-destructive. It is the fire in which the ego burns itself up. In a world of role-playing personalities, those few people who don't project a mind-made image, and there are some even on TV, in the media, and the business world, but function from the deeper core of their being. Those who do not attempt to appear more than they are, but are simply themselves, stand out as remarkable and are the only ones who truly make a difference in this world. They are the bringers of the new consciousness. Whatever they do becomes empowered because it is in alignment with the purpose of the whole. Their influence, however, goes far beyond what they do, far beyond their function. Their mere presence, simply natural, unassuming, has a transformational effect on whatever they come into contact with. When you don't play roles, it means there is no self, ego in what you do. There is no secondary agenda, protection, or strengthening of yourself. As a result, your actions have far greater power. You are totally focused on the situation. You become one with it. You don't try to be anybody in particular. You are most powerful, most effective when you are completely yourself. But don't try to be yourself. That's another role. It's called natural, spontaneous me. As soon as you are trying to be this or that, you're playing a role. Just be yourself is good advice, but it can also be misleading. The mind will come in and say, let's see, how can I be myself? Then the mind will develop some kind of strategy. How to be myself, another role. How can I be myself? Is in fact the wrong question. It implies you have to do something to be yourself. But how doesn't apply here because But how doesn't apply here because you are yourself already. Just stop adding unnecessary baggage to who you already are. But I don't know who I am. I don't know what it means to be myself. If you can be absolutely comfortable with not knowing who you are, then what's left is who you are, the being behind the human, a field of purity, potentiality rather than something that is already defined. Give up defining yourself or to others. You won't die, you will come to life, and don't be concerned with how others define you. When they define you, they are limiting themselves, so it's their problem. Whenever you interact with people, don't be there primarily as a function or a role, but as a field of conscious presence. Why does the ego play roles? Because of one unexamined assumption, one fundamental error, one unconscious thought. That thought is, I am not enough. Other unconscious thoughts follow. I need to play a role in order to get what I need to be fully myself. I need to get more so that I can be more. But you cannot be more than you are become because underneath your physical and physiological or psychological form, you are one with life itself, one with being. In form, you are and will always be inferior to some, superior to others. In essence, you are neither inferior nor superior to anyone. True self-esteem and true humility arise out of that realization. In the eyes of the ego, self-esteem and humility are contradictory. In truth, they are one and the same. So let me stop there for a second because I kind of want to talk about that for a minute because what they're saying here is that you shouldn't be yourself, or you shouldn't be like a version of yourself, because then you're just basically being an egoic version of yourself. But here's the thing about that I agree with, but I don't agree with. I agree with that because if you are stuck in a version of yourself that is not allowing for you to be a more powerful, a stronger, more empowered version of yourself, what tends to happen is you don't know how to break from that because you've been this version of yourself for so long. You've been this version of yourself that gets either, doesn't feel empowered, has issues trying to set boundaries with people, struggles with trying to push past some of the limitations that you feel are there because of pressure from family, pressure from work, pressure from whatever. So there's a version of you that you're used to being. And so you are, it says, don't be a version of yourself, but if that's all you've ever been, if that's all you know yourself to be, you don't know what you're capable of. And people who don't know what to do to break that, they don't always have a immediate spelled out path that they can take to come out of that established conditioned self. They don't know how to break out of that. They don't know how to overcome that or move past that because they can't even see, or they can't even picture a version of themselves outside of just that. So for myself, and I use myself as an example because this is what I had to go through. When I was younger, I was constantly bullied as a kid, which I've mentioned before. So I dealt with a lot of bullying growing up. And then on top of that, I was always a people pleaser. So I was always doing whatever to please people or to make them like me or to make them love me. So I was used to being that way. And then I was also always just going along with whatever. I would never have a strong position myself. I would never ask for what I needed from others. I always was just trying to make people happy or trying to do something for someone else. And that's all I knew. And I didn't know what else I was supposed to be or what else I could be other than that, because that's how I was conditioned. And I was conditioned because of my mom, I think, because she was the same way. And to this day, she's still the same way in many instances. So I couldn't grasp the idea of myself in any different way. What helped me break out of that was when I've mentioned this before, is using characters that I would see on TV, using people that I look up to, and then embodying and taking on some of their attributes, some of their personality traits, some of their behaviors, and then making it my own. In other words, it wasn't about me copying someone else and pretending like, oh, like I'm Beyonce, and I'm Beyonce, like, and pretending like I'm Beyonce. No, it was more like, I like her style. I like that about her. I like what she's doing in that situation. Taking that and then assuming it as something that I also could exhibit as well, and practicing that skill, practicing exhibiting and being that. And in doing so, it allowed me to start to like expand and reach outside of myself in a way that I had never done before. And at first it was hard for me because there were people in my life who were used to me being a certain way. And when I changed or made changes to myself because I wanted to be something other than what I was, I wanted to be a more authentic version of myself, they couldn't handle it as well. And what you will find is if you try to change on the people in your life, if you try to become a more authentic, accurate version of yourself, you may not always get the support you desire from that. You may not always get the acceptance from others. You may not always get people appreciating your efforts or even respecting and honoring the person you're choosing to be versus the person you've always been for them. And it's hard because the moment you start to be a version of yourself that feels more authentic and feels more in alignment with who you know yourself to truly authentically be, the moment that you start to do that is the moment that you're going to start to feel like you're fighting other people to just be you. To just be you. And then it becomes like a fight, you against the world. And then it starts to add layers of resentment, layers of regret, layers of anger towards people, where we start to get into this bind where we think we need to change these people, they need to change, the people at my work need to change, these family members need to change, all these people in my life around me need to change for me to be happy so I can be a version of myself. Never going to happen. You cannot wait around for someone to give you permission to be a version of yourself that is the most authentic. You just have to be the version of yourself. And these people who are not used to that and who are not going to like it are going to definitely make it harder for you and or offer up resistance. And you have to decide at that point if you want to acknowledge and honor you or if you want to honor and acknowledge them. But all that's going to do is build more resentment, more rage, more anger towards them from you. And it's not going to help you. And it's not going to give you a chance to be a more authentic version of you. So the best thing, in my opinion, and from my experience, is just be the version of yourself you want to be and let people catch up. Let people catch up. It may not be easy for them, but they will catch up. Right? And they will realize who you really are. This is something that I definitely honor and appreciate, especially amongst the trans community, because you have people who grow up being one individual, conditioned version of them, and then they start to discover who they really are. They start to understand who they truly feel they are, and they want the outside world to reflect and to align with that. And so at that point, they go through the process of transitioning. And so, when you have a male transitioning to a female, or you have a female transitioning to a male, that is a process. And people aren't always easily able to accommodate or to acclimate to those changes so quickly. And it takes time. It takes effort. I have several people in my life who are trans. I have cousins who are trans. I have friends who are trans. And the transition happened during the time where I knew them as one sex and then they transitioned over to another and they became who they knew themselves to really be. And you have to catch up. And it's not an easy transition. It's not an easy process to make for them and for the people around them, because at that point you have to realize that they've been living a version of themselves to make other people happy, or that just is conforming to societal norms or just societal expectations. And that hasn't been fair to them. And they feel empowerment now to change and to align with who they truly feel themselves to be. So we have to honor that, right? We have to accept that they've chosen that that they're going to be the authentic version of them. There's people in their lives who never choose to embrace their true selves. They just live this lie, this version of themselves, just make everybody else happy. But it's not something that is easy to live with. I mean, and I can relate to that from my level, because being a gay man, for years I tried to be a straight person in this world, and it eats you up inside. It 100% eats you up inside, because a part of you is dying on the inside every time you act out in a way that is representing this version of you that people accept or that people will take. And that is so hard. I remember with I don't know if you guys remember Dawson's Creek. That was back when like you had the WB, you had Dawson's Creek, and you had one of the main characters where he was like, he came out in the show as gay, and his sister accepted him, and some of his friends were starting to accept him, but his father would not accept him, and so he finally like came out to his father and just like said it. And I remember that scene where he's on the stairs and he's crying his eyes out, like it hurts too much. It hurts too much to lie or to be who you think I'm supposed to be. And I remember that moment because when I saw that, I hadn't come out yet. When I saw that, immediately I related to that feeling because I know what it feels like to be a version of yourself that is not authentic. So, our trans brothers and sisters, like they are just starting to realize who they are. They're embracing and accepting who they truly are. And then to have the courage to honor that is a lot of work. And those of us who don't understand it, we don't have to understand it. You don't have to understand. Nobody in this society, nobody in this world has to understand the struggle of someone who is trans, who is trying to be the authentic, most accurate version of themselves. None of us have to understand it. We just have to know that they feel the need to honor themselves truly, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that is something that we should all be taking an example and be living our own lives by. That's an example. If you have the courage to be this authentic version of yourself, just know how much can change in your life. And for myself, my life did change when I honored who I really was, when I started to acknowledge and I accepted who I was. And then I had the courage to step into that and embrace it. And so a lot of us can learn lessons from people who have to just fight just to be acknowledged and to be accepted. It's just ridiculous, but it is what it is. And so those of us who don't know that, we don't understand that struggle, it's okay. We don't have to, but we should take a page out of that book because that takes a lot of effort and a lot of courage. And some of us will never be authentic versions of ourselves, and we'll live our lives based on what our family think we should be, based on what our family want us to be. And if we decide to live that way, we will suffer and we will have resentment. And then when those people are, dead and buried, you still have to accept, this is why some people don't accept themselves or don't become an authentic version of themselves until people are gone or people are no longer a part of their lives, because they suddenly have the opportunity to be that version of themselves. So yeah, exactly. Rescue mediums, like, yes, to reveal your psychic medium and you come out about it. Yeah, and that's another layer of it. Like for me, the psychic medium part it definitely was a struggle. I will say that. It was nowhere near the level of struggle it was for me when I had to come out and accept who I was from my sexuality being gay. Like that was so much harder for me. And that has been more of a struggle for me than like being psychic or being a medium. I think for me being a psychic, being a medium, yeah, we have stigmas in society. But in this industry, either people are going to, they see you as a psychic medium and then they want to take advantage of you and take from you, or they acknowledge what you have to offer, but they respect that and understand that is where you are in your journey, etc. Then you have people who just don't want to have anything to do with you, and that's fine. Like I don't really care. But sometimes when I go to, like, if I've ever gone to a party or an event, I don't, people always ask you like, hey, what do you do for a living or whatever. I usually don't tell people that I'm a psychic or medium. I usually just tell people, oh, I'm a life coach, or I'm a spiritual a spiritual life coach or something like that. Because if I say I'm a psychic or medium, it's not that I have any shame about it. I have no shame whatsoever. People can think whatever the hell they want, but people will inevitably ask you for a reading, or they'll ask you to help them. And I'm like, I'm just trying to enjoy this party. I ain't trying to like work it, so it's harder in that instance. And this is why I don't always tell people what do I do or who I am, because if not, they immediately will start wanting stuff from you. And I was like, I'm trying to this is I'm off the clock, so I'm trying to stay off the clock for this party. Yeah, being an empath is not easy because it takes effort and time to assess your emotions. I think the first step in any empath's journey to utilizing that ability to their advantage is just learning to differentiate emotional energy that is yours versus others. And it isn't always clear, because as an empath, just thinking of another person automatically locks you into that person's energy. There are times where I'm doing a reading for someone and I may be connecting to a completely different spirit, but then once the moment the person mentions another relative who's in spirit, even though I don't try to connect with that relative and I'm trying to stay focused on the person that's coming through, automatically my mind has been made aware of another person. It opens up that channel of communication, and then they have a chance to communicate. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm trying to focus on this one person. I can't take two at the same time. Spirits, I hate, this is the thing that gets on my damn nerves with spirits. They don't listen when you say one at a time, y'all. I don't have the capacity or the bandwidth to communicate simultaneously with several people. Like, I just need one at a time, please, one at a time. And so it takes effort to kind of push those spirits away so that you can just fixate on one person's energy or one spirit's energy. But even then, like, it never stops. Like, you still have more and more flowing in, more and more coming in, and it's like you have to figure out who you're communicating with. But yeah, empathy is the best thing to be able to develop your ability, is to learn to distinguish the difference between what's your emotion and what's somebody else's emotion. Normally, when I start having a lot of like lower level emotions, I ask myself, okay, am I okay? Is something wrong? Do I feel bad? And if I feel fine and there's really nothing wrong, I'm just, carrying energy of that nature, I automatically assume that it belongs to somebody else, or I'm picking up on something that's connected to another person. And that's what I assume. So that's what tends to happen. But it takes effort, it takes practice to be able to distinguish the different energies. I remember once when I was in high school, because this was all I was into in high school. And I used to, like, I do my homework or I do my classwork, and then I'd go and open up my Sylvia Brown book, or I'd start reading again. Like, this is all I did in high school. I was reading all these spiritual books. I would go to the library and check out all of these books about channeling and about communicating with spirits and about psychic ability, etc. So I was reading a whole lot of stuff. But I remember once I was in class, and the teacher wasn't there. We had finished our work and it was just kind of just hanging out or whatever, So I was sitting there. Right behind me, there was a guy. And then right next to him, there was a female sitting down. And she wasn't having it. Like, he was trying to like mess with her, or like just get her attention. And you could see on her face that she was annoyed, but there was more to it than that. It was more than just like the visual, like facial expression of someone who's annoyed. There was like a thought behind the emotion. And it was the first time that I felt something, because as a kid, I grew up very emotionally sensitive. So as soon as I would interact with something like extreme, I would have an emotional response to it. But this was different. This was like the first time I was able to make sense of what the emotion meant. And so I remember I could feel her emotion, and it felt like a thought. And the thought was, I have much more important things to worry about in this life, that I don't have time to deal with your immature bullshit. That was the actual thought that was in my head. And what she was more concerned with was her family, or her family situation, and some stuff that was going down with her family. I didn't know this girl, by the way. I didn't know these people. Like, I didn't really talk to a lot of people in high school. I had a few friends, but I was usually, because of the bullying and stuff, I would mind my own business. But I remember feeling this energy from her. She didn't say nothing. He kept poking on her, and he's like, hey, why don't you talk to me? Why don't you talk to me? And so I turned to him and I looked at him and I said, the reason why she doesn't talk to you is because she doesn't have time for this immature bullshit that you are trying to have with her. She has more important concerns with her family and what's going on at home than to be dealing with you and giving you her time and attention. So she doesn't have time for it. So this is why she's not talking to you. And she, like, her eyes opened up and she looked at me, like, she's like, that's exactly what I was thinking. And I was like, well, it was obvious, even though it wasn't obvious, but that's exactly what she was thinking about in her mind when she was having those reactions. But at that moment, I didn't realize what was happening, other than I was picking up on her emotions, and I knew what she was feeling in her head as a thought. And that's how I was picking up on it. Yeah, it's hard because especially growing up in like when if you grow up in like a Baptist community or grow up in like a Catholic community. I was raised Catholic, so that's where I came from, and some with my mom, even and my mom was psychic, but she was schizophrenic, but they kept thinking that she was possessed by the devil, so they kept trying to exorcise the demons or free her from her possession. And so it was sad because that's where they went first before they took her to like an institution or the hospital to get some actual medical help. And so, and it's the stupid, isn't it the stupidest thing, y'all? Like, tell people that you speak to spirits and they're like, ooh, oh no, like, oh no, I can't be around you. But when you tell people, what are you doing? And you're like, oh, I'm praying. I'm like, who are you praying to? Oh, I'm praying to God. Or do you talk to God? Yeah, I talk to God every day. And I try to, talk to God and feel, I'm like, okay, well, does God ever talk back? And they might actually try to tell you, yeah, God talks back to me and he guides me and he gives me, okay, cool. And then all of a sudden, then you tell them you talk to spirits and they're like, oh no, get away from, they have a difference of opinion and they don't appreciate or they don't understand what that's about. So it's interesting whenever you run into that kind of situation. And it's kind of sad because you get basically shut down or you're unable to really relate to the person, and they might have the same experiences that you've had, but you're unable to kind of make that connection or acknowledge that. I'm having like weird stuff coming up in my computer. It's like, running out of space. I'm like, space? What are you talking about? Like everything's in the cloud. There should be no space missing on my computer. So for those of you who are on Facebook or on YouTube, if the connection stops or whatever, that's probably the reason why. So just FYI, in case there's a disconnect to the connection, okay? Yeah, it is. It is. And it's funny because, I mean, also spirituality includes like the ability to manifest like abilities, like actual like abilities. So you're able to heal. Like all of when you start to open up to your potential as a spiritual being and you accept that and you accept the fact that you don't need an intermediary between you and source or between you and God. When you accept that you have a direct link to God, and then you accept the fact that you are a child of God, not it's a nice thought that we're all children of God. No, I'm talking about like you acknowledge who you truly are in this physical world and that you are a child of the source. There's an aspect, there's something that starts to happen where your ability or capabilities to exemplify powers or abilities, you can call them powers, I call them like capabilities or abilities, that starts to kick up, it starts to go up, you start to have more things happening that you did not realize were possible. And so I remember some of that, and I remember having that situation with my sister where I was upset about something because of a letter that I had read, and I was sitting down with her on one side of the room and the letter was on the other side of the room on the desk, and I was angry and just upset, whatever, and then I like pointed to the letter and the letter immediately flew off the table and into the air, and my sister freaked out and she was like, oh Nano, like this is scary, like what the hell is that? And so you have abilities, but we're supposed to be human, we're supposed to have very human lives in this physical dimension. And so the opportunity to express that or to show people like what you can do in a power way or an ability way is not going to be as simple, just because we're not supposed to have those kind of capabilities in this lifetime through this physical form. We're supposed to very much be human in this form. Reading some of the comments. Xtina, have you ever spoken or heard a message from God or Jesus? The voice of God is your own voice in your head. Because think of it this way. People always think like, I'm going to hear this booming voice and Fernando, I am God and I am, like, doesn't sound like that at all. Like, no way, no Jose, doesn't sound like that at all. The voice of God, this is how it works. So there's the source form, which is aware of everything all the time. So it's not like there's like anything that has to really be communicated. So there's the source form, and then that that wisdom, that higher knowledge, that information, that communication then filters to the next point of reference, which is your soul. So my soul's name is Aja. That's the name of my soul. I'm just one personality in the many lifetimes of my soul. My soul has a purse full of lifetimes it's got in its pocketbook. So it's got a lot of those experiences. So whenever I am hearing the voice of God, which we all have the ability to do so, is it filters down through my soul, which is a higher version of myself. And then that filters down to me, but it sounds like myself. So it sounds like me in my head. And sometimes people like to associate that with the spirit guide. Spirit guide can use the same channel. It's all coming through the same channel. We're not supposed to have someone with us in our lifetime to tell us what to do. That's not the role of God or the role of, if you think of God as a witness rather than a doer, then you'll understand the reason why things happen the way they do. Because God is not the doer, God is the witness of all things. It's the consciousness behind all things. It's the binding force behind all things. So God is the witness of all things, but then also the doer. But the doer isn't in singular form in the way that you want to think of the consciousness. The doer is us. We are the doer of God. We are the physical expression of God. Now, granted, there are incidents and there are things that happen that are miraculous or that are out of the ordinary. And you can say those are all things connected to the divine and God, because they are. But at the end of the day, God's voice is your voice in your head that sounds wiser, that sounds smarter, or that is coming from a place of love and understanding and is not coming from a place of judgment. That is the one thing that I've encountered with God that has really been just a game changer for me. I always considered God to be this old man up in heaven somewhere on a chair, Fernando, I'm judging. No, it's not like that. The energy isn't even like that at all. It actually sounds more like a smart ass version of myself, except there's more love behind it. And it's just reflecting back what I obviously already know, but I'm refusing to accept for myself. So it sounds like that. Now, granted, there are downloads, which is not even a voice. It's just a download. In other words, if I am just minding my own business, walking or doing whatever, and then all of a sudden a thought shows up in my head, and then all of a sudden it's almost like, those files where like you download a zip file and then it unloads and it literally like expands while it's in your computer. It's like that. There's a download, and then all of a sudden as you get this download, then there's this expansion of information, and it almost feels like your brain blew up or like threw up in your head, and but it all makes sense and it's all somehow connected, but it's so much information you can't understand it all at once. And so that is also, I consider, another form of receiving communication from God. And so when I get those downloads, literally I take out my phone and I'm like, oh shit. And I'm like trying to like record every single thought about that I'm having, because it's overwhelming. And it's almost like you can't type your fingers fast enough, or you can't like type fast enough. It's like, too much. And then you have to type it all out as quickly as possible. It's way more than just like a voice talking to you in that way. So I wish that spirits, that I could hear their physical voice. Like, I wish I could hear it as a separate voice in my head. Of course, I'd probably be considered crazy or schizophrenic. But when I'm communicating with a spirit, the closest thing I've ever heard to an actual spirit communicating to me is not by coming through with their own voice, but using, again, a memory of me talking, or a memory of me using my own voice in my head. And then I'm like, okay. And then I have to distinguish the difference, because there is a subtle difference emotionally between them and us. And so you have to learn kind of the difference at that point. Yeah, the downloads are crazy intense. Like, they're just really insane. And I think that's something that I'm going to mention in my psychic book, is these downloads, because when you receive a download, it is almost like gibberish if you don't understand how to use it or make sense of it. It almost is just like gibberish. And we're all receiving downloads. We're all receiving information. Some of my predictions that I've made, some of my predictions that I've made were just downloads. I was literally just like, allowing myself to relax enough, and then it pops in my head, and I'm just like, okay, do I do something with that, or do I just let that go? Is that just me thinking about something? And then if it shows up again the next day, or if it comes back again, I'm like, okay, I know I need to say something, and then I go ahead and put it out there, or I'll share it. And it happens in waves. Like, you'll get downloads in waves, where it doesn't always happen all at once. So I always think, Jennifer, I always think of, when I think of like God or the universe, I always think of us as being cells within the body of Source. So we're all like cells or atoms within the body of Source. And I think of it that way just because it's almost like a repeating pattern anyways. And something that I've been told is that everything repeats in patterns. So there's always a repeating theme or repeating pattern that tends to happen whenever it has to do with like, whenever it has to do with like creation all the way down to like the smallest of things is how you want to put it. No, I don't have the book out. It was supposed to be out in summertime, but it is fallen behind. So I'm working on it now. I had to step away from it for a bit. Then I've come back to it. So now I've been working on it again. So hopefully it'll be out before it's just embarrassing. So hopefully it'll be out before it's embarrassing. So we'll see what happens. And FYI, y'all, like whenever people have experiences where they feel they've met God or they've seen God, always know that to truly understand the immensity of that energy, that conscious energy, is pretty impossible for a singular being to experience unless it is a version of it. And so most people, whenever we have experiences where we witness or see something, it is a filtered version. It's almost like staring directly into the sun. People tell you, don't look directly into the sun, you'll burn your corneas. It's just that you don't have the capacity in your eyes to be able to look into a sun like that because the ability in your eyeballs are not there. Same thing with like being a separate version of Source. Unless the only way you can experience the fullness of Source is by actually being within the Source form, like being 100% aligned with it, which is what the karmic path is about. It's about stepping away from God, and this is the cyclical pattern. This is how it works. You've got the form of, you can call it a form because it's not really a form. It's just let's call it a consciousness. So there's the consciousness of Source, of God, and then we create the illusion of separation. So we separate ourselves. And then we start to figure out who we are, what we're about, what everything's about, understanding the universe, understanding everything else, understanding each other, understanding our connection, trying to understand the connection to Source, trying to reclaim that connection to Source, understanding what's really connecting us to Source, and then boom, we reassemble into the Source consciousness. And then we're as one again. So it's almost this like cyclical pattern away from and then coming back to. And every single being in the universe or in existence is on that same journey, away and back to, away and back to. We're never lost. We're just doing these horseshoes back into Source, back into the divine. But whenever we experience a version of Source of God, people who have near-death experiences, people who see things, they are experiencing the version of Source that we're capable of experiencing in that moment at that time in our life. And many people will have different versions of Source or of God because it is based on what they're able or what they're capable of. And so that's why, everyone, you won't have a bunch of people describing the same exact person or the same exact experience. Everybody's going to have a very personalized experience because, again, it is a personalized custom experience of the divine. Oh, well, thank you about that. Thank you. I was planning on self-publishing, so that's what I'm going to be doing is self-publishing. But I don't know if that's going to end up being the case because we'll see what happens when I'm done, and then I have to have it re-edited again just to make sure everything's going to come across in the right way. These are personal. I don't believe in the idea of spiritual gifts because what tends to happen, this is getting so I'm pretty much done with this anyways. What tends to happen is people use the idea of like spiritual gifts as a way to separate themselves from the fold. In other words, I have this, I can do this, I'm special, I'm different, I'm unique, I'm better than. And so there's this like mindset that goes along with that. I found that some of the most supposedly spiritually minded people who consider themselves to be woke or who consider themselves to be elevated are actually quite the opposite. The fact, once you get to a place of love and compassion, you realize we literally are all connected. We are all one. And if you start to think that you're special or better or higher, or if you start to even have a thought like that, that is a number one red flag that you're actually not woke, or that you're not ascending in a spiritual way. You're actually creating a additional issue for yourself. You're creating an additional mechanism of separation. Nothing separates us. We are all one. And so you are all my brothers and sisters. I am your brother and sister. We are all connected on the same level. So I don't like the idea of like trying to single ourselves out as like, I'm spiritually woke, or I'm spiritually, no, it's like some people are just very confused. You know, you throw a bunch of kids into a room that has no light. Some of those kids are going to scream bloody murder. Some of those kids are going to start like pushing kids out of fear or out of anger or out of anxiety. Some of those kids are going to just stay put or feel like they're stuck and they don't know what to do. Some of those kids are going to be like, oh my God, this is freaking crazy. I'm just going to like stay away from the craziness and just kind of like try to stand into an area where there's nothing, even though it's completely dark, right? There's nothing in the room. And then some of those kids are going to take charge and say like, hey y'all, hey, everybody calm down. It's going to be okay. Some of those kids will take charge. And so everybody's on a different journey. Everybody's going through what they're going through. Everybody is experiencing things in a way that they need to for their soul's development. But at the end of the day, we're all still stuck in the same room. And so if we are all in physical form, if you're a human with a human body and you have a physical, like, you know, body and you're in form, there's a level of enlightenment. There's a level of ascension that you're not even able to access no matter what you do, just because you're still in human form. As long as you're in human form, you're subject to human condition. You're subject to the experience of suffering. Every human being suffers, period. It's built into every single person's life. No one has a perfect life. No one has an ideal life. No one has a life devoid of suffering. We all suffer in one way, shape, or form. So we're all here in this dark room trying to figure it out. Some of us, after yelling bloody murder for a while, get smart enough or realize it's not really helping us do anything. And then we start changing the way that we're handling the situation. Some of us who are stuck and feel like we're like, we can't do anything, or we're like not able to change the situation. We start either watching what other people are doing and mimicking them, or we start exploring and trying to figure out what we need to do. So, I mean, it just depends. That everybody's journey is different, but everybody's still in the same journey, and everybody has the same capability. Everybody has the same capacity. Some of us just figure it out and we use it, or we try to do something with it. It's the only difference. So whenever people like, you know, and so that's why I don't like to refer to psychic ability or mediumship as like a spiritual gift, because it's like, maybe I came in with this already built in, or maybe I came in with a sensitivity to this, but in no way, shape, or form does this make me better than any of you, or makes me like above y'all in any way, shape, or form. I am on the same level. I am physical form. And until I have achieved what I'm here to do, I'm still here. I'm still going to stay here. So I'm stuck in this dark room along with the rest of y'all, and we just kind of have to work it out. But some of us come together and we realize that we are together in the room, or that we're going through something together, or that we can comfort each other while we're going through the process of figuring things out. And that's what I appreciate. And that's ultimately what the idea of enlightenment, I think, focuses on, is two things. One is we are human form, and we will, all of us, endure suffering in one shape or another, which the Buddha got right. And then the second thing is we are all in it together. So we either use each other in love and compassion and work to cooperate and to achieve, or we turn on each other and turn this into a living hell. And sometimes we turn on ourselves in the process. And so those are like the two key things. And you have people who are able to find peace in their life. There's nothing wrong with wanting peace in your life, especially if you've gone through it. And so having peace in life is great, but if you are having peace by completely separating yourself from the rest of reality, and you don't even want to engage with the rest of the world in any way, then at that point you're just running away. You're not really enlightened or elevating yourself spiritually. The most spiritual growth comes from being able to understand who you are, knowing your place in all things, knowing everybody else's place in all things, recognizing that we're all one, and still holding to ideas of compassion, love, and connection within the chaos that you call life. That is superior mastery right there. That is what really means to elevate yourself spiritually. Thinking that you're going to like fade into like energy, and that the angels are going to descend from the heavens, and you're going to be walking around as an energy blob, it's just not going to happen in this physical form. This reality was created and is the way it is specifically for a reason, and we all chose to on a soul level that this reality should exist in this way. It will always exist in this way. It has always existed in this way. Nothing has changed from that. So there have been many cultures before, many people before who have bought into the idea that there was going to be this like ultimate moment where there was like a fight between good and evil, or where like someone was going to ascend and people were going to stay behind. You got the Jehovah's Witness doing the same bullshit. Like all of it is bought into, but it's never happened because it's never going to happen in this form. We are human. We're in physical form. Yes, we will deal with some really interesting times. That doesn't mean that we're going to become energy beings and then just ascend and then everything's going to be, it's not going to happen. Not going to happen. Good question. Do you ever have to block out dark energy or spirits? Okay, so I have an agreement with them that I'm going to lend myself to them, and that means they have access to all aspects of my nature, and I allow myself all aspects of my nature. So I'm a human being. I have emotional experiences of anger, rage, all of the lower vibratory states, and then I have experiences in the lighter vibratory states. Now, when I communicate with spirits, or the work that I do requires me to maintain a higher elevated state of awareness or of being, which is rooted in love, compassion, connection. So that actually allows me to be able to do the work that I do. When I go into a lower vibratory state, it is harder to maintain some of these abilities just because it takes you very much it connects you with the physical, and the physical exists for a reason, but it's not to be glorified, right? And if we glorify the physical, or we get too caught up in like the drama of the physical, then we lose our perception of source and of those higher realms. So I have an agreement with them that I'm going to do this work. I'm going to allow myself to be used by them. But at the end of the day, when I clock out or when I check out, they need to respect my boundaries, and that's it. But I allow myself to be used. So I give myself permission. I give them permission to use me. So when I connect with spirits, I have spirits who come through who are both spectrums, positive and negative. Most people want to connect with loved ones who they cared about or they loved. So that tends to be the majority of the people in spirit form that I connect with. But I've also had people come through who were pedophiles, who were rapists, who were serial killers. Like I've had people come through in sessions like that. I don't enjoy it. I definitely don't really care to do it because I'm like, no, like you're, no. But at the same time, I trust the process, and I trust that there's a higher power at work. And so again, I lend myself to the process. But when it comes to like dealing with negativity or negative beings around me when I'm not on the clock or when I'm not intentionally connecting with the spirit, they don't mess with me. I have no real experience with those forms because I'm very intentional in my work, that I do the work that I do to help other people. I'm not just trying to do this to get attention. I'm not just trying to do this to open up the door to whatever wants to communicate with me. So I have something to prove that I can connect with the spirit world. No, I don't do that. I'm very intentional with the work that I do. So if I want to work with specific types of situations, or if I want to work with healing people or giving them, connection with their loved ones in spirit, there's a love there. And that love acts as a protective boundary so that I'm not being possessed by like dark or negative spirits or beings, or I don't have to deal with it. I really don't have to deal with it very often at all. Actually, I don't deal with it at all, other than when I'm doing a mediumship session and I've given myself over and someone is coming forward who needs to apologize or who needs to try to make amends. And even then it's up to the person if they want to accept it or forgive them or not. It's up to them. I have nothing to do with that. But it's a loving God would grant someone an opportunity to understand what they did not do in life that they should have done differently, and then try to make amends and have that opportunity as well. So I don't really have to deal with negativity in that way. I deal with a lot more negative people in life than I do with spirits in the spirit world or energies in that way. So all right, guys, I think I'm coming close to my time here because I got to go and yeah, so I think I'm coming close to my time. I might be on TV tomorrow. I don't know yet. I was asked to be on a show, but I haven't heard back about the details. So I'm like, okay, I don't know if it's going to happen tomorrow or not. But if it is going to happen, I'll post something in the morning. I just don't know. I'm freaking out a little bit. I'm a little nervous. I'm definitely like out of my comfort zone, but I still got to do it. I can't, like, if I die tomorrow, I can't die and say, well, I didn't try it or I didn't put myself out there. No, it's like, it is an opportunity to just, connect and to reach a new audience. So it's an opportunity to do this work and to spread the messages. But yeah, so I might be on TV tomorrow. So I don't know yet, guys, but I will let you know. If not, then it isn't supposed to happen tomorrow. But all right, guys, I love you all, and I will see you. Well, I might see you tomorrow, but if not,